My name is Ciara Corscadden Hennessy. I'm a co-director at 126 Gallery and Studios in Galway, and I'm a visual artist as well. So I've been invited up here to curate Anarchive, which is an amazing opportunity to work with the fantastic members of Artlink and the great Artlink team, and to come up with a theme and design a brief for the show overall. And I landed on Anarchive, which is kind of a form of looking at expanded portraiture. Anarchive as a title kind of came about in looking at expanded portraiture for portraiture's kind of ability to document life as kind of a tool for power and deciding who was remembered and who wasn't. And so traditionally there are these power structures and this infrastructure around portraiture that has led to only certain parts of society or certain things being documented. But the portrait is such a vast kind of concept. It can document, it can be beautiful, it's really just a mark of life. And so I kind of landed upon the title of Anarchive as not really a traditional archive, but sort of a mark of existence, which is really all that portraiture kind of is. But the notion of kind of pulling that idea apart and deciding what gets remembered and what hangs on and what doesn't, and kind of allowing different people to interpret that as they will. And within the show there's a really vast array of works and mediums and, you know, very expanded portraiture, which is really beautiful to see people marking and documenting different elements of themselves, their lives, their experiences. And I think that's kind of what makes us human. So thinking about memory and time within that context is interesting. There's a broad range of different media, and we have 2 performances that are happening on the opening night, which I think kind of speaks to the ephemerality or the temporality of artwork and of archiving. And there are some sculptures that are using materials that are intrinsically linked with childhood or more abstract kind of ideas around that, and portraits that are being created through objectivity rather than a direct representation, which allows for this sort of ephemeral nature of human beings to exist in the marks that they leave within their life rather than just the physical marks. And so I think that ephemeral quality really comes through some of the works, that there's this deeply personal link with memory and with objectivity through the sculptures, as well as through the paintings as well. So the paintings are so vast and so different, and there's beautiful photography works that are quite abstract as well. And the idea is that it's more about the mark making that the life makes or that a person makes than about the power structures that decide what is and what isn't. I think the material diversity in this exhibition was incredibly important because I didn't want to look at the literal idea of portraiture or of archiving, and I didn't want to just have direct representations of people or personhood or life. I wanted to have different materials and different objectivity that could be a part of identity, of human nature, and of kind of life itself. So it was really important to me to have a vast array of approaches to this theme. And I think that's really reflected in the work in the show, that there are such different mediums and such different kind of sculptural practices. And then the painting and photography practices are also quite abstracted. We do have some kind of traditional forms of portraiture as well, which is equally as valid and important, but the diversity was what I was really trying to get at in terms of how diverse human life is, and that there is no direct archive, or there is no direct archiving of what is and what isn't, you know. So it's allowed for the more expanded representation of life and humanity really within the show. We have about, I think, 48 or 50 artists in the show in total, which is fantastic. And some with one piece, some with diptychs or a couple of other pieces. And that's a really nice thing to have such an array and such different practices. And I think that's very reflective of the Artlink members and the people that are a part of Artlink. The piece Potato Skins is really interesting. And it's kind of a sculptural wall hanging piece that is made up of different kind of found objects and a pot with a growing potato plant and potato peels as part of the sculpture. And I think that it kind of creates this really intimate portrayal of kind of a vaster identity, but through a really intimate lens. And I think that's a very hard thing to do, but it's very beautiful. And then the Polaroid pictures as well that are entitled My Mother's Roses. They are kind of portraits of objects that someone had interacted with, perhaps on a daily or monthly or yearly basis. And we're kind of, the viewer is left guessing to that, but the title and the simple kind of triptych form of these 3 Polaroids kind of has this beautiful, nostalgic feel to them and just allows you to kind of interact with this person who may or may not still be with us. So it's a capturing of things that might seem unimportant, but again, creates that real intimacy within the work. And there's a piece by Cian Hanshu as well that is incorporating natural materials and a car seat as well, and some kind of directly made objects, but it's this sort of marrying between landscape and the artificial world and kind of rewilding an artificial thing and trying to bring it back to the earth and trying to, I guess, rewild ourselves, or not necessarily rewild ourselves, but that our connection to landscape and memory are intrinsically linked. And I find all 3 of those works particularly are fascinating and just completely diverse approaches to them, which is wonderful to see that sort of interpretation of artists of a theme that you've set, and they just kind of create very diverse and very different interpretations, which is like the beauty of a show like this, that you get so many different practices within the one space. And it's such a blessing as a curator to be able to kind of put them together and think about them and be exposed to so many new artists as well and their creative practice. So I think my own background is definitely fascinated by the idea of archiving and historical power structures and patriarchal and colonial power structures. So within my own practice, I am kind of interrogating identity through those means. So the idea of Anarchive kind of tied in with my own creative practice. And so I'm kind of constantly interrogating that idea of inherited power structures. And I think the portrait kind of sums that up as a whole, or the idea of an archive kind of sums that up as a whole, because it is a direct link to your ancestry, or a direct link to a time that was before, and is kind of steeped in all these power structures and infrastructure, that it's kind of unmissable at times. And so I really like the idea of challenging those narratives and interrogating the inherited memories that we have. So archiving and the idea of an archive or a non-archive or kind of an expanded archive definitely ties in with that, I think, and within my own creative practice and work. I think my kind of aim with the exhibition is to get people to think about what is and what isn't remembered, and kind of giving that reverence to memory and what it means to be kind of human. I think the portrait is, and not just the portrait, but the archive is kind of intrinsically linked with nostalgia and memory. And I hope that it gives people that sense of allowing those memories to exist, whether uncomfortable or comfortable, and giving them kind of a reverence. I guess that's what I hope that people get, and kind of to assess some of the wider remit around what is and isn't remembered, and who we choose to remember and who we choose to not remember. And I think that's quite important here and now as well, with what's happening in the world, because there's so much horror happening everywhere, particularly in Palestine at the moment, and we need to ensure that their livelihoods and their memory lives on. And so I guess I would hope that people kind of think about what the importance of memory, I guess, and the importance of human life being remembered and marked in all its facets.